right there. You see it, you feel of it, because he's got so many in stock. I mean, he's got the biggest selection in the Southeast of gun safes, corporate safes. He's got jewelry safes. He's got safes for your valuables, whatever you might need. He's got shelters in there, vaults even. The Safe House has set the standard that the other safe companies try to get to, and they never ever managed to do it. They're the only safe specialty company in Nashville. If you're considering a safe of any sort, remember, they're sales tax free on those gun safes, and Mark wants to talk to you at the Safe House. NashvilleSafehouse.com, NashvilleSafehouse.com, or better yet, 4th Avenue South in Nashville. Come on, it is the Matt Murphy Radio Show, Super Talk 99.7 WTN 105. Good afternoon and welcome back. Love to have you with us. Thank you for your time. Whatever time you're able to give us, we're appreciative of it. We get 3 hours a day, 180 minutes before we hand off to the drive with Brian Wilson. It's information-fueled and opinion-driven News Talk Radio on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's my episode 288 every day. Feels like a holiday when I'm with you. 615-737-9986 is our telephone number. 615-737-9986. That's also the super text line. And you are invited to be a part of it. John writes in and says, Matt, at this rate, you'll need an extra hour to cover it all. Good job. Very needed discussion. Best show today. Thank you, John. You're very serious. John also said, so serious today, Matt. Take a look at Bell and have a laugh. I always do that. Every time I look at Bell, I have a laugh. And then John asked where I'm going next, and that is, guess I've been under a rock, but I've not heard about the rampant slavery in San Francisco. Can you enlighten me? Oh, I can. And I will. I have the info. So I didn't cover this when we first saw it because I just thought it was foolish. And frankly, I had written this. I made mention yesterday. If you're watching on Super Talk TV, there's my notes. Right, you can see those on a daily basis. I don't put them online or whatnot, but I'm old school. I write them down. Right. So several times I've written this story down on my list of subjects to get to on a day-to-day basis, and I've not been able to get to it. That's always the case. There's always something left hanging on the tree that we're not able to get to. But it's gotten so ludicrous, I feel like we need to mention it. This is where our society is going. We're upside down. We're absolutely upside down in society right now. So in January, give you a little backstory, San Francisco's African American Reparations Advisory Committee, or the AARAC, as it's known, that's a joke, released its plan for making things right by its African-American citizens. The big headline came out of the plan that it was a reparations payment of $5 million to every black San Franciscan. My immediate reaction to that is, did you know that I have African-American heritage in my history, San Francisco? No, I kid, but mine's more Native American. I'm still waiting on my check. The AARAC, or the African American Reparations Advisory Committee, said it called for a one-time lump sum reparations repayment of $5 million to every eligible recipient. The amount would cover the, quote, economic and opportunity losses that black San Franciscans have endured collectively as the result of both intentional decision and unintended harm perpetuated by city policy, according to the draft. To qualify for the payment, residents must be 18 at the time of the committee's proposal, or at the time of enactment, must have identified as black or African American on public documents for at least 10 years. They may also have to prove they were born in the city between 1940 and 1996, have resided in San Francisco for at least 13 years, and be someone or the direct descendant of someone incarcerated during the war on drugs. Huh? Okay. Now, before I go any further lampooning this concept, let me make sure I'm clear here. There is no amount of discussion or calls for forgiveness or apologies by any entity that will change our nation's history. None. I do not know of any sensible human being in the United States of America that doesn't recognize the evils of slavery. I would also note at this point that while it did take a conflict in our very own country to do so, that slavery as an institution was abolished in the 1860s in the United States of America. That by no means dismisses some of the social and political injustices that occurred in the aftermath of slavery well into the 20th century. No amount of discussion is going to change the history that this country went through. And we should be able to recognize, and I believe we do, a really good job of recognizing the good and the bad, the right and the wrong. But make no mistake, this is not about correcting a wrong. This is about collecting a check. And no amount of money is going to change our nation's past. On with the story. If the requirements sound a bit confusing, it should. So the requirements are the residents must be 18 at the time of the committee's proposal to be enacted. They must identify as black for the last 10 years. They have to prove that they were born in San Francisco between 1940 and 1996 and have resided in San Francisco for at least 13 years and be someone or a direct descendant of someone incarcerated during the war on drugs. So I don't even know. You were born in the city between 1940 and 1996 and resided in San Francisco for at least 13 years. So I suppose that means that you could have moved out of San Francisco years ago and you could still receive a reparations payment. In any case, there were other recommendations within the plan that were fairly significant but did not get a lot of media attention. The AARAC proposal had an economic empowerment section that would require the city to supplement the income of all African-American households for the next 250 years. I'm not making this up. As was pointed out, there's no suggestion in the proposal how many people would be eligible for any of this. But an industrious reporter, and I found this article on Free Republic when I was doing my research last night, did their best to come up with some form of math formula to figure out how much all of this was going to cost. So there's a ballpark estimate of about 30,000 people that would meet the requirements in San Francisco, which meant a lump sum payment of $150 billion. 5 million times 30,000. Which is more than 10 times the city's annual budget. There's also nothing in the document about how the AARAC proposed to pay for this, which again seemed like an indication that the authors weren't too serious about any of this. Well, the Washington Post yesterday had a follow-up story which comes to the conclusion that there was no math done with this proposal. Eric McDonald, the chairman of the Reparations Committee and principal of Peacock Partnerships, a San Francisco-based consulting firm, and I am certain that he got a tidy sum of money to come up with this proposal, said there wasn't a math formula. It was a journey for the committee towards what could represent a significant enough investment in families to put them on a path to economic well-being, growth, and viability that slavery and the policies that flowed from it destroyed. So the Post quotes John Dennis, chairman of the San Francisco Republican Party, who says that he's open to a conversation about whether black residents should receive reparations, but that proposal wasn't serious. Quote, it's just a bunch of like-minded people who got in a room and came up with a number. You'll notice in that report there's no justification for the $5 million, no analysis provided. This was an opportunity to do serious work, and they blew it. Even the Washington Post said San Francisco's $5 million proposal, multitudes larger than amounts being discussed in other communities, has drawn intense backlash from conservatives who lambast the idea as financially ruinous for a city with an annual budget of $14 billion that's still recovering economically from the pandemic and the fact that it's a crap hole city, by the way. I said that. They didn't. The proposal doesn't explain who would qualify, but even at a fraction of the city's 50,000 black residents, if they met the criteria, it would consume a huge amount, if not all of its annual budget. If only half of the black residents were eligible, that would mean a payment of $125 billion, which is roughly 9 times the city's entire annual budget. If 10% of black San Franciscans were deemed eligible, it would consume the entire annual budget, plus nearly the following year's budget. Not to mention the amount of lawsuits that will flow from this proposal. Now, you're asking yourself, well, Murphy, if this is something that is just untenable from a math perspective, it doesn't work, why are we discussing it? San Francisco is attempting to move forward with the concept of reparations, which would trickle down, obviously, to other communities, including Nashville, Tennessee. And we must recognize the ills and the sins of slavery and also recognize that this is insane. On its face. And it doesn't solve anything. But what it does do in this 2023 woke society, illustrate how beneficial it has become to become a victim. Being a victim is good business nowadays. It really is. Ask Megan Hall. Oh, yes, Matt Murphy is going to compare the San Francisco, or I'm going to link together in my indelicate way the San Francisco reparations proposal and Megan Hall out in Laverne, who decided that she was going to do the horizontal mambo with multiple individuals on third shift at the Laverne Police Department, and now she's suing the city of Laverne because she says she was a victim. I mean, it pays to be a victim. Megan Hall is banking on the idea that this will be too much of a pain in the arse. That one was for you, Dan Mandis. It was too much of a pain to deal with her, and so we just give her a sum of money and pay her off and make her shut up and go away. That's the concept there. You see, many people, be they black, white, brown, no matter their color, no matter their socioeconomic background, they recognize, knowingly or unknowingly, and some of this may be even unnoticed by the people that are advancing this agenda, they recognize how much easier it is in our society today and psychologically not to take responsibility for their own actions. I'll use Megan Hall as the obvious example, but it applies to many of the people in San Francisco that don't want to face that they are where they are in their lives because of their own actions. And through no fault of anyone else's, wherever they are in their life is ultimately their responsibility. Megan Hall, not to put too fine a point on it, made her own bed. There is no suggestion, nor has there been any suggestion, that Megan Hall was forced to do anything sexually with these other officers. Although she now says she was a rookie officer and didn't know any better. She was coerced and didn't know any better. Just as the people of San Francisco who are advancing this nonsensical reparations agenda would tell you that through no fault of their own, they were placed in socioeconomic circumstances that had their genesis back in the 1840s when slavery was legal. And in all of this, there's never a moment by which these people look at themselves in the mirror and recognize that in a real way, in a very real way, that everything that they have found in front of them in their lives was a part of their own decision-making and their own doing. And I say this as a final point on this. I'm not wagging my finger at anyone because I've been there. You want to find blame. You want to make excuses. You want to suggest that others are responsible for your condition in your life. But in the long term, I'm not talking about natural disasters. I'm not talking about catastrophic circumstances that come to us unbeknownst to us. I'm not talking about a traffic accident where another person was at fault. I'm talking about your daily life condition. 99% of the time, the individual responsible, if you're looking in the mirror, the individual responsible for where you are in your life is looking right back at you. That is not a statement of blame. I'm not assigning blame. I'm empowering you. Do you understand the incredible amount of power that you have to change and alter your course if you're uncomfortable where you are in your life? Megan, you brought yourself to this point, and you can make something of your life from this point. If you're willing to learn from it and not wag your finger and blame everyone else but yourself. The only thing that occurs if you pay off individuals based on circumstances that they nor anyone else making the payments had to do with, the only thing you're empowering them to do is to come to the till again for more money. If you do not change the mental condition of the individual based on the conditions that they are in, if you do not empower that individual to make more of themselves on their own, no amount of money is going to change where they are mentally. How many stories do we have to read about? Lottery winners who snag $5 million, and oh boy, our lives are changed for the better and for the rest of our lives. And 2 or 3 years later, they are broke again. Money does not change the circumstances of your life outside of offering a temporary way for you to avoid the reasons why you got there in the first place. And if that's what you choose to do with your money, you're just going to be right there again before you know it. It's 1:23 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hey, folks, it's Matt Murphy. You know, I talk a lot about Brink Fiddler and Defense Systems. I want to sing his praises for a moment. Not only does Brink come to your place of business, your school, your church organization, not only does he impart a wealth of knowledge when he offers his seminars to those locations in order to help you understand about workplace violence, active shooter situations, how many are occurring nowadays, and how you can protect yourself, your loved ones, your workmates from the unlikely event that you find yourself in a circumstance like that. But Defense Systems also sponsored the TECC training course that I went through over the weekend. I was out Friday and went through the course on Saturday, and what an incredible opportunity it was. Now, there'll be another very soon, and I'll tell you all about it when that comes up. I encourage every single person within the sound of my voice to go through this course. It is so empowering in terms of what you can do if you find yourself in a casualty situation, an emergency situation. But beyond that, if you're a business owner, if you are a decision maker at a church or a school, Defense Systems is all about active shooter and physical security in a dangerously developing world. I know that you hope that this never happens to you. I left my 2-day training seminar hoping that I never had to use the life skills that I was taught over a 2-day period. But if I happen to find myself in a life-threatening situation, I know what to do, and I hope you do as well. Hope is not a plan. It is time to get trained through Defense Systems. Contact Defense Systems at, defensesystems.com. That's defensesystems.com, or reach out 236-6484 for Defense Systems. All right, Super Talk 99.7 WTN, the Matt Murphy Show continues. It is 129. Matt, did you just say in those regulations they had to identify as black? Yes, I did. You have to, the regulations state you have to identify as black for the last 10 years. Micah writes in, Matt, apologies. I'm not local. Oh, I don't know what that is. Larry says, you're correct in the responsibility for acts. The difference being you use her full name multiple times, yet not once have heard you mention the full names of the men involved. Y'all as a radio station have promoted the destruction of only her from the start of this crap. I haven't promoted anything, Larry. She destroyed her own career. And naturally, she is going to be at the center of this because she was at the center of this. I'm not trying to be funny. If the 5 police officers, I mean, all of them, including the chief that were fired, 6 people got fired here, including the chief, okay? I had another caller or another super texter, 5604. Why was she the only one fired? She was not the only one fired, not in Laverne. A total of 6 people have been fired, and I think 3 others were suspended, if I'm not mistaken. Is that correct? Mac Moore's shaking his head. So the 5 involved, including the female and 4 other officers on third shift and the chief, have all been fired. Now, the reason the female, some are taking exception with the fact, and I don't have to name her, and I don't have the names of the guys in front of me, otherwise I would run them down. But here's the bottom line. No criminal conduct was believed to have occurred. However, all 5 of these individuals, with the knowledge apparently of the chief, or at least he either knew or should have known that something wrong was going on, that's why he was let go, they violated their oath. They violated the public trust. And, oh, by the way, they were on duty getting paid to serve the public, and they were apparently serving one another, if you know what I'm saying. The reason the female gets the most attention, I would tell you, is because without the female being involved, one would presume that none of this would have been going on. But she was kind of the linchpin in all of this. It was her involved in each of the sexual altercations. So I think you would see, I'm just trying to answer the question that several of you have asked. Why are you focusing on the female and not the guys? Well, because she was the center of all of what was going on. Without her, none of this would have been going on. I'm not saying the guys aren't at fault too. They are, certainly. And they've obviously had to answer to the police department, and they will have to answer to their spouses and whatnot, and ultimately to, whatever higher power they believe in. We'll get to Franken on reparations coming up in just a moment. Plus, Mayor Pete wants you to know that it's not his fault that he has to fly on taxpayer-funded private jets. Not his fault. I'll explain that to you. Oh, by the way, he's going back to Ohio, and believe it or not, none other than Don Lemon has asked him why asked Mayor Pete why Joe Biden hasn't gone. We'll cover that for you in just a moment. It's 1:32 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Winkler. The financial world can be full of landmines for investors. On the one hand, investment firms and the financial community will often overcomplicate the financial planning process to confuse investors. As one guy who used to work a big investment firm once told me, if an investor thinks that they're over their head, they'll blindly trust you. And it's easier to sell to them. I'm glad I'm away from that. On the other hand, many people oversimplify investing to the detriment of investors. Just having a little knowledge can be really dangerous. The idea there is the same. It's just a different way of selling things. At Paul Winkler Inc., we like working alongside our clients with an education guidance approach. I believe that there's confidence that comes with knowing what you're doing and why. We abide by the very highest level of fiduciary care, and we use the most sophisticated financial planning tools out there. And every one of our offices is run by a degreed planner with over 20 years experience. No kids fresh out of college. If that sounds like a winning formula, set up a free 15-minute phone call to learn more. Go to paulwinkler.com or call 615-851-1950. You can do this.
All right, it's Super Talk 99.7 WTN 137. Several of you on the Super Text line have noted, and it's a good point, we were discussing reparations and certain individuals not wanting to take responsibility for where they are in life, and so they're looking for a money grab. I mean, this is a city that can't manage to keep the poop off the streets, right? A city so overrun with bureaucracy. This was well described several weeks ago by Bill Maher. And boy, oh boy, when I disagree with Bill, I disagree with Bill. And when I agree with Bill, I agree with Bill. One thing you have to recognize about him, he takes a position, he sticks there, and he doesn't care who likes it and who doesn't. And I have a respect for that. I feel like I'm the same way. I hope I am. But Bill Maher was talking about an outdoor toilet that was being bid on for the city of San Francisco. This toilet was designed to be for the homeless, and it had to be, self-cleaning. It had to be stainless or of some material where it could not be graffitied, obviously. It had to be thief-proof and destruction-proof. It was a pretty expensive toilet. Well, they came back with a price tag of $1.7 million for one toilet. One. A toilet, like a porta potty. Like an indestructible self-cleaning porta potty. Well, someone in San Francisco learned about this project and they said, well, this is ridiculous. I'll pay for the toilet. I'll pay for the physical cost of the toilet and for the cost of the installation. And you'll think I'm making this up when I tell you the rest of the story, and I promise you I'm not, that the city came back and said, well, thank you very much for your generous donation of the cost of the actual toilet. And this was not something that they were like designing. It already existed. So it was $1.7 million. The guy offered to pay for the toilet and the installation, and the cost was still going to be $1.2 million. And you're scratching your head right now thinking, well, Murphy, how is that? How in the world is the cost still that amount of money? The $1.2 million of the $1.7 million total was for bureaucracy. We had to do a study as to the environmental impact of the toilet. And we had to get several code violations cleared up before we could install the toilet. And we had to do a study about where exactly to install the toilet after considering all of the environmental impact. And we had to get this permit and that permit for the construction of a safe space for people to travel here and there while the construction was going. All of this nonsensical paperwork and bureaucracy cost $1.2 million. And you wonder why there's poop on the streets. In the meantime, they want to pay $5 million to every resident that claims some sort of harm because of the color of their skin, based on a condition that they've never been a part of, slavery. But back to that started the conversation, and then I applied some of the same principles to the situation out in Laverne. The woman involved in the sexual escapades of the third shift of the Laverne Police Department, a woman by the name of Megan Hall, is suing the city. And I should have noted this. Bad host, I did not. Many of you did. One of the reasons that I'm pointing out her name and not the names of the other guys that were involved in all of this is not because she was the center of all of this activity that was going on. But two, to my knowledge, these officers that were fired have taken responsibility for what they did and they moved on. She's the one saying that she's a victim. She's the one that's claiming that she bears no responsibility for any of this. Pardon me while I fix this. So that's part of it. Frank is in Bethpage. Frank wants to talk about reparations, and I love the opportunity to talk with him. Hey, Frank, how are you?
Hey, how you doing? This reparations thing, I have a couple of questions. Does this carry forward? So if some woman's got a 1 or 2 or 3-year-old, do they set up a trust fund so they get $5 million when they turn 18? Or if you're biracial, like Obama, his mom is white, his dad is actually from the country of Africa. Does he get $2.5 million? I mean, they're going to set a committee up probably on this and try and work all that out.
Well, I can answer those first two questions pretty quickly. One, it does not apply to anyone under the age of 18. So those poor youngsters will have to sue to get their money, which I will expect they will do if they're not afforded the opportunity to get the $5 million. And as far as actually being black, you don't actually have to be black. It says that you have to have identified as black for the last 10 years.
Just like the lady who ran the NAACP for however many years, and she just identified as black, and her parents were like, no, she's as European as they get.
Yeah, what was her name? Rachel?
I can't remember, but it's hilarious. Yeah. So many years she just identified as black, and so I guess she gets reparations too. But
well, and then you have the counter to that, right? Like Clarence Thomas was born a poor black man or poor black child in South Carolina, the son of sharecroppers. I mean, in the depths of poverty, he rose his way through educational opportunities to the United States Supreme Court, and liberals say that he's not really black.
Yeah, I know, and they mimic that, and they trash him. I worked with a man once who worked his way up, same thing. He said, I avoided gangs. At school, I went different routes, and he's very successful. It's what you make of it. He, at a young age, did not want to be a part of that, and, went a different route. So, It's like you were saying earlier. It's individual. What you want to do.
Well, but being a victim nowadays pays, though.
Oh, big time. Big time.
I mean, obviously. Thanks a lot, Frank, for the telephone call. Kathy points out on the super text line, and she's right. Slavery was never legal in San Francisco when California became a state, and California got in pretty early because of the gold rush of 1849. If my Ms. Bolton would be proud of me. Ms. Bolton taught me a lot of things in U.S. history, taught me a lot of things that I didn't know about black history. Ms. Bolton would slide me books because she felt like I could handle them. Books that were not offered as course curriculum. And I went back later on in my life. Just little backstory. Ms. Bolton was African-American teacher. And she would slide me books in an effort to teach me about certain aspects of African-American history that we perhaps weren't learning as a part of the curriculum. I'm not blaming the course study for not teaching us that. It was simply a matter of time. But she also was teaching me some life lessons that I value to this day about one's upbringing, one's focus during that upbringing, and how that can affect, relatively speaking, the way that we look at the world. One of the books that she gave me when I was in ninth grade was a book called Man-Child in the Promised Land. And I'm not endorsing the book. I'm just relating that to you. But anyway, San Francisco was never a slave community. But I think the justification on the part of this organization, the AARAC, would be that because of the slavery that existed when California became a state, that systemic racism spilled over or something or another into the 1900s and well beyond is the idea. 615-737-9986 is our telephone number if you'd like to be a part of the show. We would love to have you. Ron DeSantis has now signed a bill into law that ends Disney's self-governing power and puts the media giant under the control of a state board as it should have been. It's time to stop Big Mouse in Florida, and Ron DeSantis has done so. In a signing statement at a news conference held at a firehouse minutes away from Disney World, DeSantis said since the 1960s, they've enjoyed privileges unlike any other company or individual in the state of Florida has ever enjoyed. They had exemptions from laws that everyone else had to follow, and they were able to get huge amounts of benefit without paying their fair share of taxes. Before signing the legislation, DeSantis told attendees to check their watches so they would know what time the corporate kingdom came to an end. He then went on to say, how do you give one theme park its own government, then treat all of the other theme parks differently? So we believe that was not a good policy. We believe that being joined at the hip with this one California-based company was not something that was justifiable or sustainable. He added that Disney World will now be treated like SeaWorld and every other theme park in the state. The bill, which was HB 9B, renames the Randy Creek Improvement District, where Disney World is housed, to the Central Florida Tourism Oversight District that may only have term-limited members who are not recent employees or have been contacted by Disney in the past 3 years. My signature, he said, will also end Disney's exemption from Florida Building Code and Florida Fire Prevention Code. It will end Disney's exemption from state regulatory review and approval. DeSantis, and I'm going on here in the Fox News article about the subject, named 5 names of new board members that will have their first meeting next week. He added that one of the first items on the agenda for them will be reviewing the compensation for the first responders in the area. We have people that want to see Disney be what Walt envisioned, DeSantis said. A couple of things here to unpack. It is fascinating to me that liberals fashion themselves as anti-corporatists, that they're against these big, mean. I mean, think Bernie Sanders, for example. He's against these big, mean, evil companies that come down here and do these big, mean, evil things to people, and they don't care about anything but their billions of dollars in profits. I was watching the stuttering, sloppy Joe Biden in an interview that he conducted with David Muir, or also known as David Muir, this past Friday, in which Joe Biden, they're making billions. He was talking about this rail disaster in Ohio, a place that he has yet to go for no other reason that he doesn't want to. And he said, well, these railroad companies, they're making billions of dollars. And I'm thinking,
I did not say that.
You did.
I did not say that.
You did too, Joe. You did too. I heard you. I have it on tape. Joe Biden says, they're making billions of dollars. And he said it in a tone that was like, oh, it's so bad. What's wrong with making money?
You want to see my temper? Keep going.
I do, Mr. President. I mean, something's better than nothing. So Joe Biden says that making money is a bad thing. Typically, liberals would tell you that the big, mean, evil, nasty corporations, whether it be big oil or big tobacco or big this or big that they're just raping the average folk out there of their money. Yet somehow, when it comes to Disney World, a place that cost untold thousands of dollars to go to, they're immune from that criticism. And they should have their own little sanctum sanctorum when it comes to their own government. One of the funnier aspects of this was a reaction on social media. I'll read one example of what is potentially the dumbest take I have ever seen on Twitter, and that is saying a lot. In reaction to this law passing, which stops Disney's autonomy over the zone that they have declared their own, to the point that it's my understanding they had eminent domain power within the Disney zone, that they could just take over people's property without the people being able to say anything about it. I mean, it's just ridiculous. And obviously, the state sold its soul for a pound of manna or a pound of flesh or a pound of silver, whatever. So DeSantis signs this, repairing what was a bad piece of legislation, picking winners and losers. And this person at Darling Americans wrote, "My guess is that Disney will just relocate. I have to believe that almost any state in the union friendly to all walks of life would absolutely be glad to welcome Disney's new park in their state." It is the dumbest take I've ever heard on Twitter. And that's saying something. Mr. or Ms. Darling American, do you understand the billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions and billions of dollars that it would take for Disney to relocate? You dolt. 152 on Super Talk. All right, I understand August is some time away, but it'll be here before you know it, and I want you to be ready for August 4th through the 6th in downtown Nashville. I'm talking, of course, about the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix. Now, you guys know how I feel about auto racing, all forms of auto racing. I missed this event last year, and I am not missing the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix this year. It will be the party of the year. You bet your asphalt on that. You need to snag your tickets before they're gone. Let's talk about some of the incredible activities going on August 4th through the 6th. Nashville will play host to 3 days of racing. There'll be music, there'll be food, there'll be racing. The 3-day weekend is guaranteed to be a blur with, well, racing food, racing beer, racing music, and more racing, all culminating with the NTT IndyCar Series racing through the streets of Nashville. That's coming on Sunday. It is time to burn some of these bridges. Did you know that the only race in which these racers go over water is right here in Nashville? I think it's pretty cool. That's just me, but in no other race do they go over water. Now, they say they don't really notice it that much because, I don't know, they're going 170 miles an hour. You be the judge. When you go to the Big Machine Music City Grand Prix, the race that gets around Nashville, get your tickets today by signing up at MusicCityGP.com. That's MusicCityGP.com.
It's 2 o'clock. I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 72 degrees, and the sun is flying and shining high today in Music City. Again, summer-like temps in February. Now, let's not get used to it. Later this week, we'll see that sun die down as we have a chance of showers Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday. Weather coming up in just a few minutes. Starting in the nation's capital with the Supreme Court, they're hearing oral arguments about President Biden's student loan forgiveness plan. 6 Republican-led states slated are suing to block it. Here's Ike Ajaji.
It was one of President Biden's campaign promises, but a group of Republican-led states feel the administration's plan to cancel federal student loan debt for more than 40 million Americans is expensive, unfair, and an abuse of executive power. On the Senate floor, Majority Leader Chuck Schumer speaking in support of the program, saying it isn't a handout.
90% of the relief going to out-of-school borrowers will go to those earning less than $75,000 a year. This is critical relief to working and middle-class families.
Crime right now in the Volunteer State. Channel 4 says that a former Perry County deputy, 31-year-old Jonathan Kelly, was arrested for allegedly raping a woman during a traffic stop. The investigation began in December of 2021. Agents found Kelly told the woman that she would not be charged if she had sex with him. Last week, the Perry County grand jury returned indictments against Kelly, and he's been booked in the Perry County jail yesterday on a $65,000 bond. And right now in Tennessee, momentum is growing at the state capitol to do something to help young people who may be struggling with depression or other issues.
There is bipartisan support for a bill that puts mental health resources in front of teens and young adults. News Channel 5 says the bill adds life-saving contact information for suicide and crisis hotlines on every student ID card for public universities. Now, this information is already on IDs for students in grades 6 through 12. Recent data from the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention showed a majority of teenage girls surveyed, about 60%, reported feelings of persistent sadness and hopelessness. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
Hey everybody, I'm Paul Winkler. The financial world can be full of landmines for investors. On the one hand, investment firms and the financial community will often overcomplicate the financial planning process to confuse investors. As one guy who used to work a big investment firm once told me, if an investor thinks that they're over their head, they'll blindly trust you. And it's easier to sell to them. I'm glad I'm away from that. On the other hand, many people oversimplify investing to the detriment of investors. Just having a little knowledge can be really dangerous. The idea there is the same. It's just a different way of selling things. At Paul Winkler Inc., we like working alongside our clients with an education guidance approach. I believe that there's confidence that comes with knowing what you're doing and why. We abide by the very highest level of fiduciary care, and we use the most sophisticated financial planning tools out there. And every one of our offices is run by a degreed planner with over 20 years experience. No kids fresh out of college. If that sounds like a winning formula, set up a free 15-minute phone call to learn more. Go to paulwinkler.com or call 615-851-1950. You can do this.
All right, here we are. Super Talk 99.7 WTN. It's the Matt Murphy Show, 2:05, almost 2:06. Thank you for being a part of the show today. Whatever time you're able to give us, we're certainly appreciative. We're on from noon until 3, Monday through Friday, making way for the drive with Brian Wilson on a day-to-day basis. It's an honor to do so. It's an honor to be a part of this live and local lineup that includes Michael Del Giorno, Dan Mandis, of course, the aforementioned Wilson, and yours truly, Matt Murphy, from noon until 3. You can also find us on Super Talk TV. We invite you to be a part of that. And I've been remiss in reminding you to subscribe to these various platforms as you happen upon us. On YouTube, on Facebook, on Twitter, or Twitch. There are always places where you can give the little subscription, and you're invited to do that as you watch us on a day-to-day basis. I hope you're able to do that. If you're able to put up with my face, God bless you. You deserve something wonderful. I wish you could see Bel Case, but he won't go on camera. It's just true. It's just true.
What the hell is that?
Well, I know. I can't. No amount of maybe if I empowered you on the super text line to beg of him.
Text in.
Maybe if I asked you to text in, because What are you just quitting on the show? You won't come on camera and you won't open the super text line either? Is there anything else you don't want to do? You don't want to screen calls anymore? I mean, just let me know. Just let me know. No. You stop talking to me in my ear. If you want to talk to me, you go on camera, you talk to me on air. Otherwise, just stop talking to my ear. But you just tell me what you want to do as a part of your job, and I'll make sure that you don't have to do the other parts, okay? Okay. Senator Bill Hagerty's coming up in about 5 minutes. Hopefully we'll get to him. Well, what we'll do is we'll take a break early, and then we'll get to him a little bit later on. Bill Hagerty obviously has a lot to discuss. What with the porous southern border, what with the conflict ongoing in Ukraine and all the amounts of money that are going on over there. Janet Yellen just announced another $10 billion and was proud to announce a direct budget support payment of $1.2 billion is already in your bank account. You can use it at your leisure. So that's on the way on the show as well. I will get to the story that I promised you about the basketball team, the girls' basketball team out of Vermont. But first, we get to Emma in Nashville, who joins us discussing the reparation story out of San Francisco. Emma, glad you called. Good afternoon.
I think maybe it's Anna.
Oh, I'm sorry, Anna. Bell tells me that he no longer considers it a responsibility of his to spell your name correctly. So.
Oh, well, don't you know why he can't come on camera? He's in witness protection program.
We're beginning to wonder, Anna.
No. Well, but I have a question that I don't mean to be rude or unkind, but I wonder if anyone has ever done the research backwards. I'm not saying slavery's fine, but some of the generations who have been raised here after slavery, what would their life have been like had they grown up and spent their entire life where their family started in Africa? They might not. I'm just saying that our country is pretty open with opportunities for people. I'm not sure that getting to grow up in this country is less good than growing up in rural Africa.
Well, I mean, I've heard the argument, and obviously, I mean, that doesn't. The hypothetical doesn't dismiss some of the evils that individuals' ancestors faced in the United States of America. And I don't want to seem like I'm dismissing that. I don't want to come off, Anna, as suggesting that you or I are saying, well, yeah, you had to go through slavery, but aren't you better off now?
No, that's never what I would be saying either.
Right.
No.
And I know, and I know that, Miss Anna. Of course, I know that you're not saying that. I don't want anyone to take our words and try to twist them into that. But it is certainly true that we are a country that better lives up to our original charter than than we ever have. And it seems that even in the midst of that, in the fact that we are trying to live up to the original philosophical premise of the country that all men are created equal and endowed by our Creator with certain inalienable rights, among those life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Of course, that's in the Declaration. We didn't live up to it when that was written. Not for everyone, because we considered Africans to be property and not humans, and obviously that was wrong. We live up to that more now than we ever have, and it seems that there are more people that have become victims than ever before, and that just, in some ways, baffles me.
Well, and we have a new front of slavery now. That sometimes makes me wonder that it's being left out, because if we were a child and we were being used, it's a whole new frontier. That's horrible. But no, I think in my heart and in my mind, one of the main things that the African people lost was their heritage, their way of life, their culture. That's the saddest part for me, that they lost their homeland and their way of life. Well, freedom, of course, was the number one thing. But okay, well, I just wonder, because I've never heard anyone address that.
Well, it certainly put America on a different path, and it put many of those individuals on the continent of Africa, obviously on a completely different trajectory as well. But no, your point is well taken, Miss Anna, and I'm glad you called. I was not reflecting on what I thought Miss Anna's point was. I was more reflecting on how some could try to intentionally misconstrue her point for their own agendas. To say, well, what, you're saying that what they went through was okay because they're better? No one's saying that. No one's suggesting that. But I would suggest that America is the greatest country on God's green earth, and I think that's what Anna was saying. And I defy you to find me one better. All right, I'll tell you what we'll do, because I don't want to waste any time when we get back with Senator Hagerty. Let's go ahead and take an early break at 2:12. And when we come back, hopefully we'll have Senator Bill Hagerty on the show to talk about a variety of issues, to include a subject that maybe has not made headlines here in Tennessee, but it should. It's called the D.C. Crime Bill, and Senator Hagerty has taken the lead on stopping this nonsense in a change to regulations that would make it easier for criminals to be on the street. We'll do that next on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Hey, friends, it's Matt Murphy. Hey, it's hot, right? I mean, I know it's weird. It's the end of February, but it's hot. And it'll get cool, and it'll get hot, and it'll get cool. I mean, that's the way it goes. And so you've got the heat on in the early morning, you got the AC on in the afternoon, or whatever. Well, let me tell you something, folks. Efficient Heating and Cooling is the one person that I would recommend you call for any issues that you might have. And now is the time to go ahead and make that call with Efficient Heating and Cooling and Jeff Eddy. Talk to Jeff or one of his qualified team, and go ahead and get on their schedule for your springtime tune-up. It is so important to tune up that AC. It's going to extend the life of your AC. I don't know how long, a year, 2 years, 4 years, 8 years. I don't know how long. I know this, that if you maintenance your car, you get better life out of it. When you make sure that you go and you get the dentist to check your teeth, you're going to not run into teeth problems down the road or tooth problems down the road. The same goes for your AC. They have a flat fee. You'll never pay more than $125 on a residential call if you call Jeff Eddy for maintenance purposes. And that's with however many units you have, 2, 3, 4. Does not matter with Jeff Eddy, and oftentimes you're paying less than that. Plus, when it's time to replace, they have free financing offered. It's available. Ask them about that. And they're a diamond contractor with Mitsubishi Electric and an Elite Pro partner with Rheem. Call today. EfficientHVAC.net is the website. Here's the number, 615-784-4424, 784-4424 for Efficient.
An update on Ohio and the train derailment and the water over there. How clean is it? Plus some crime at B&A. That and more, 2:30. Super Talk, 99.7 WTN.
Hey, friends, Matt Murphy and the Matt Murphy Show. We continue 2:17. Thank you, Mac Morey. We look forward to that update coming up in about 13 minutes or so. We took a break a little early to make way for our next guest. Senator Bill Hagerty joins us on the Matt Murphy Show hotline to talk about activities going on in Washington, D.C. and beyond. Plus, he's recently back in D.C. from a trip home during the break there and wanted to ask him about that. Senator Hagerty, good to be with you. Thank you so much for being on with us on Super Talk. How are you, sir?
I'm very well, Matt. Thank you. It's always great to be with you.
Talk to us a little about your trip home, first and foremost. Obviously, I know it's good for you to get back to Tennessee, away from the swamp that is Washington, D.C. What did you do on in your time home?
We spent a good deal of time over in East Tennessee in this trip. What I did is what I generally do is went around, met with employers, local leaders, and had a number of meetings just with the general public to get a sense for how people are feeling in Tennessee. I would say this: we are much better off in Tennessee than many other states in the nation. But with that said, there is a huge amount of concern among Tennesseans about our southern border, our safety as a nation, the fentanyl crisis that has precipitated. You think about what's happening around the world as well, whether it be in Ukraine, whether it be China and Taiwan or North Korea back at it again. Inflation has been a constant and persistent issue that is not going away. And the concern I think I felt from as I talked with is, couched in an appreciation for how things are going in our state and leadership at the state level, but deep concern about what is happening at the national level with our nation and, frankly, what we're going to leave for our children to come.
I was looking at some of the testimony being offered on Capitol Hill regarding fentanyl and what's happening at our southern border. And it is frightening that so many in our country seem to want to ignore the very real results of allowing this open border policy to continue. I know there's precious little that you, Senator, can do about it individually or even collectively that the Republicans can do, considering that the Biden administration is in charge of the border security to the south. But it has to break your heart, as it does mine, when you hear stories. There was testimony from a young woman who lost 2 of her sons to fentanyl overdose. This is due to this porous southern border. What, if anything, can we expect to be done about this in the near term?
It is heartbreaking, Matt. I did a roundtable with local sheriffs and chiefs of police in Putnam County, Cookeville, last week while I was home too, and this was the dominant conversation point: is fentanyl. The fact that each month is worse than the month before it. It is touching lives throughout our state. 2,000 to 3,000 people will die this year due to drug overdoses. Most of it fentanyl, all coming across that southern border in China, and China being involved in all of that. I should say the southern border being the cartels and their partners in China that help make all of these drugs that are literally killing our kids. If you look at the number one cause of death between young people between the ages of 18 and 45, it's drug overdose in America now. It's a disgrace. And the law enforcement officers are telling me that it's not getting better. It's just a terrible problem. And if we don't do something to wake up and stop it, it's reached crisis proportions already. What really frustrates me, Matt, I was on the floor of the Senate 3 times last year, modifying Title 42 to include concern about drug overdose from fentanyl. That is the public health concern that our Customs and Border Patrol agents can use to turn these drug dealers back. Democrats blocked me each time. I'm not giving up. I'm going to continue to try to drive this and continue to dare them to keep blocking this and continue to facilitate the flow of drugs into this nation, killing our kids. It's just unconscionable what the Democrats are willing to do.
Well, and not only do we have the southern border crisis that leads to the fentanyl crisis that exists right now in the United States of America, in our major metropolitan areas, almost all of which are run by Democrats. We see this spike in crime in the midst of these soft approaches to criminal prosecution on the part of DAs, many of whom were funded, as you well know, Senator, by George Soros and the like in their campaigns to be elected as district attorneys. And now they have these soft on crime approaches. We've heard about Los Angeles. We've heard about Chicago. We hear about New York. And now this soft on crime approach is coming to the nation's capital itself, Washington, D.C. You first taught me about this in a press release a few weeks ago, that this is happening on the local level, but we do have an ability to put a stop to it on the federal level. Tell me how this started and where we are regarding this D.C. crime bill.
Well, Matt, it's been going on for 2 years. This started in 2001 with the D.C. City Council put forward proposals to reduce the penalties for serious felonies here in the district. The mayor tried to amend it. They turned it all down. The mayor actually vetoed their bill to do two things. One, reduce the penalties for felonies. I'm talking murder, carjackings, major property theft. They want to reduce the penalties for these activities at a time when you've seen crime in D.C. skyrocket. Carjackings have tripled in the past 3 years, Matt. Homicides have now exceeded 200 per year for each of the past 2 years. And just in February of this year is up 20% from last year, which was already at a record. This is a tremendous problem. And the DC City Council solution to this is to lower the penalties. Another thing they're doing too, which is really, just hard to believe, they want to make it mandatory for any misdemeanor to get a jury trial. Well, what does that mean? We've already got a massive backlog here in D.C. of people awaiting jury trials for their felony charges. What this means is the prosecutor is going to stop prosecuting misdemeanors altogether because they can't add any more burden to an already broken system. So this is just lunacy. This is not going to stand. I've stepped up because on the Appropriations Committee where I serve, I am the ranking member for the subcommittee that has oversight over the District of Columbia. The Constitution and the D.C. Home Rule Act give us the authority to reject these sorts of crazy laws. That's what we're in the process of doing right now and sending a strong message back to the district to wake up, stop doing this woke, this sort of woke signaling, if you want to call it virtue signaling that they're doing, and let's get back to a place that's safe for my constituents from Tennessee to come and visit. I had 110 people here this morning. Senator Blackburn and I did from Tennessee visiting us. They need to be able to come here and feel safe. This is the federal district. This is our nation's capital, and the D.C. Council wants to turn it into a joke.
For those not visiting Washington, D.C., either recently or do not have plans, it might seem a small thing. It's not a small thing. I think it's a microcosm of a much larger issue, and that's this soft on crime approach nationwide by our country's Democrats. What is their justification, Senator? I know that they scream home rule, and we can get into that piece in a moment, but do they have any justification for softening their stance on criminal activity when so much of it seems to be going on?
Well, they certainly can't justify it to their own constituents because over 70% of the people in the District of Columbia that are permanent residents here are against their proposal as well. As I said, the mayor of the District of Columbia vetoed it. So this is just an out of touch, completely disengaged city council that are trying to send some sort of message to the world, I guess, and burnish their wacko liberal credentials. But at the same time, they're making this district less safe. They're making our nation's capital into an embarrassment for the nation, and it's our job to stop this. So
and for those who don't, Senator, understand why a United States senator from Tennessee has say in this, explain to them the concept of congressional oversight for the District of Columbia, and tell me, do you believe you have the votes to overturn this ridiculous local rule?
Well, both the Constitution and the D.C. Home Rule Act provide for congressional oversight. As you know, the district has fallen into financial disrepair in the past and has come under the control board of the U.S. Congress. We're the backstop here. We're the ones that are going to they're going to ask American taxpayers to bail them out. And I think, coming in and mandating a reduction in penalties for serious crimes and therefore incentivizing more serious crime is going to really hammer them from a tourism standpoint, hurt their revenue stream, and make them even more likely to wind up basically in a bankrupt situation that we have to bail out. So, yes, we do need to be addressing this from a financial responsibility standpoint and, frankly, from the public safety standpoint. Our citizens view the Federal District of Columbia as their capital. They need to be able to do that and come here safely. I certainly think the residents of D.C. appreciate the fact that they're accommodated at our University of Tennessee with in-state tuition. We do a lot of things to accommodate this district, and I think the district needs to accommodate safety here. I can't understand why in the world they think this would be a good idea.
On the vote front, I think, and obviously, we wish the best for John Fetterman and his medical recovery. but he is not present currently. And I hear that our friend from West Virginia, Joe Manchin, has said that he will be voting with the Republicans in terms of the repeal. Does that mean you have the votes? I believe it's a simple majority to pass this, right?
It's a simple majority, Matt. As always, you understand this very well. So we've got enough votes right now to do it. My expectation, though, is there'll be a number of additional Democrats that join me. The similar language went through the House of Representatives 2 weeks ago before I came home to Tennessee, and that legislation had all Republicans and 31 Democrats that supported it. So solid bipartisan support. The 31st Democrat, by the way, had just been mugged in her apartment that morning before coming over and casting a vote with us to stop this lunacy.
Oh, wow. The president, Joe Biden, is speaking right now about how the Republican plans in Washington, D.C. would explode the deficit, which I think on its face is laughable, Senator. But I want to ask you specifically on some of the foreign policy expenditures that we're seeing under the Biden administration. We had Secretary of the Treasury Janet Yellen recently in Ukraine announcing a $10 billion direct budget support payment to the Ukrainian government. I know most of us are sensitive to what Vladimir Putin is doing in Ukraine. Most of us believe that Vladimir Putin needs to be pushed back by the Ukrainian people. That is the right thing to do. He is the bad actor in this. But we also recognize an inability on the part of the American people to open our checkbook with a blank check without any accountability. To my math, it's about $113 billion at this stage. I'm curious what you think of all of this and where you are on this issue.
Well, Matt, I found myself in the tough position of supporting the Ukrainians and wanting to see them win, wanting to push back on Vladimir Putin aggressively. I wanted Joe Biden to do this well before Russia ever invaded. We should have given him a taste of what sanctions would have felt like even then to try to deter the situation. And if we were going to arm them, we should have done it in advance to create a deterrence. Joe Biden didn't want to do that. What they do want is a blank check, just as you say. The way they've gone about allocating these funds has been physically irresponsible. There is no game plan. There's no articulation of what we're doing and how we're going to win with it. I have voted against these bills, and until we're able to take care of things here in America, you look at our own safety, our own southern border, it's very hard to justify an aimless administration who just seems to want to throw money at problems, our money, without a concrete plan to win. We have questioned them and directly asked them, what is your plan? How are you going to get out of, get us through this? What are you going to do to get the Ukrainians to win? Joe Biden's answer is as long as it takes. That's not going to work for me and for many of my colleagues here in the Senate. We're not going to write a blank check here. A lot of these funds are not going to military armaments. These are going to what they call non-governmental organizations. These are humanitarian organizations, high lack of accountability there. Ukraine's already got big problems with corruption. I don't think this is going to age well at all.
Only time for one final question, Senator, and I know your time's limited. I appreciate it today, but I could ask you about the China revelations regarding what came out of the Wuhan virology lab. We kind of figured that this would eventually come around to awareness on the part of the general public. But I want to go to Ohio, East Palestine. I mean, your heart just goes out to those folks. Talk to me about your thoughts on this. It took weeks for the Biden administration to get there. Finally, Pete Buttigieg is there, blaming everyone other than himself as the Secretary of Transportation. It is, frankly, shameful that the Biden administration did not recognize the issues involved there sooner. Any thoughts on that?
Well, certainly. I was just talking with my colleague, J.D. Vance, new senator from Ohio, today about this issue. One, their effort to deflect responsibility, the Biden's effort to deflect responsibility to the prior administration is groundless. There is nothing in the deregulatory undertakings that the Trump administration did that had any impact on this whatsoever. What you see is the typical incompetence of the Biden administration. They try to manage by press release and by spin rather than actually getting in, rolling up their sleeves and doing the job. And unfortunately, they have been terrible at picking people who are competent to do the job. And Pete Buttigieg has demonstrated the fact that he does not have the competence to run the Department of Transportation. And we are seeing this unfold in spades. I'll also note this. J.D. Vance was home this past week, dealing with the situation in East Palestine, trying to get as much pressure as he possibly can on Norfolk Southern and the EPA to get in and get this problem addressed, while his counterpart, the Democrat senator from Ohio, Sherrod Brown, was out in Hollywood doing fundraisers for himself. So, again, it just shows you the lack of attention that the Democrats are placing to real tragedy here in America. They're more than happy to talk about it in other countries, but to deal with real tragedy here in America, they'd rather not be bothered.
Great conversation as always, Senator. We look forward to the next one. Take care and keep up the good work in D.C.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt. All the best.
All right, take care. There's Senator Bill Hagerty joining us for a few moments. We'll take a break. We'll reflect on that in a moment. Come back after this. It's 2:32 on Super Talk.
.232, I'm Mac Maury with your top stories. Right now, 74 degrees and sunny. Sun is out and bright today in Nashville. Expecting some rain later on in the week, but for now, enjoy that nice weather. Weather coming up in just a few minutes. Environmental Protection Agency Administrator Michael Regan back in East Palestine, Ohio, the scene of that toxic train wreck. Regan today saying the federal help will be there for, quote, as long as it takes, and announcing that the EPA's Community Welcome Center is now open to aid the community. Here's Regan when asked whether people should go into contaminated water.
I'm a father of a 9-year-old. I think we have to all agree that we wish this accident didn't occur. The accident occurred, and as a result, some of our creeks and our streams have pollution in them. We're working very hard to clean up that pollution. For the time being, while the pollution is present, as a father, I would not advise anybody, adult or child, play in the creeks and streams.
Crime at BNA. Canine Officer Havoc is back at it again as the good boy seized around 11 pounds of fentanyl in the form of blue pills at the airport yesterday morning. The man had an Alabama driver's license that showed he was 22-year-old Michael Chandler, and he claimed that he must have picked up the wrong bag. Surveillance footage shows he never was on a flight, and it shows he just picked up the luggage. He has been charged and is now in custody on a $150,000 bond. That's the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Maury, WTN News.
All right, so fellas, you're 42, 44, 46, like me, 49, and you're feeling sluggish. Maybe you're just fine in the bedroom, and when you hear the Tennessee Men's Clinic commercials talking about bedroom activity, you think, well, that's not for me. I don't have any of those troubles, Murph. So I'm of no, you don't even have to talk to me. Well, how about this? If you're not feeling yourself, if you're just chalking it up to middle age, why not go get checked on the testosterone front? Studies show that over the last 40 years, men's testosterone has been steadily declining, especially for men in their 40s and 50s. And what if I told you that you could do something about this if you find your testosterone levels low, get that testosterone back up to where it was, get that energy, that verve, that vigor again, and yeah, it can help you in the bedroom if that is an issue for you gentlemen, and for some, it is. Tennessee Men's Clinic. I encourage you to make the call and let them talk to you about what they can do for you. The Tennessee Men's Clinic is here for you. They were the originators. Go to TennesseeMen'sClinic.com online. That's TennesseeMen'sClinic.com. Or give them a call today at 208-9090, 615-208-9090 for our friends at Tennessee Men's Clinic. Thanks again to Senator Bill Hagerty joining us for a few moments. You can find that podcasted at about 3 o'clock this afternoon. Normally, that's when Bell gets the podcasts up at 997WTN.com, just in case you missed any of that. It's 2:39 on Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Matt Murphy and you until 3. We hand off to Brian Wilson and the drive starting at 3 o'clock this afternoon. As promised, this is, this is an amazing testimony to where we are in American society. I'll read you the story and give you an opportunity to reflect on it. 615-737-9986. A Christian school in Vermont forfeited a girls' basketball game and withdrew from the state championship tournament because a player on the opposing team was a transgender student athlete. Mid-Vermont Christian School was set to play the Longtail Mountain Lions last Tuesday before the former decided not to compete with the latter based on concerns for player safety and fairness. A senior administration official at Mid-Vermont Christian School told Fox News, "We withdrew from the tournament because we believe playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardizes the fairness of the game and the safety of our players. Allowing biological males to participate in women's sports sets a bad precedent for the future of women's sports in general." So this is the real-world consequence of some of these woke garbage laws being passed by woke garbage states. Do not understand this. Do not understand how some of you don't understand how acquiescing to 0.3% of the general population and changing the entire structure of our society, how it's going to impact said structure if we continue. State law in Vermont prohibits, or rather permits, I should say, transgender females to play in girls' sporting leagues and prohibits any discrimination based on gender identity. According to the Vermont Agency of Education, in their best practices, they say, quote, "Transgender and gender nonconforming students are to be provided the same opportunities to participate in physical education as are all other students. Participation in competitive athletic activities and sports will be resolved on a case-by-case basis." In October 2022, a middle school girls soccer coach from Randolph Union High School was suspended after he reportedly, quote, misgendered a trans student while defending his daughter who was uncomfortable with the individual being in the girls' locker room. The same month, administrators at the school banned members of the girls' volleyball team after objecting to sharing it with a biological male. One concerned student told Fox News, "I feel like for stating my opinion that I don't want a biological man changing with me, that I should not have harassment charges or bullying charges. They should all be dropped." The Mountain Lions had completed their 20-game schedule without any issues up to this point. Lauren Thomas, an executive director, told a local paper, "I've received calls asking for best practices on how to go forward knowing they're going to play a team with a transgender female on it. We just supported our stance and our best practices through our inclusivity statement." Where do you think all of this ends? I am sensitive to gender dysphoria. I get it. I'm not dismissing that. But it is a real and present issue with a minuscule portion of our population. We have set up our society to distinguish between men and women in certain arenas, sports being one of them. Where do you think any of this ends? What do you think happens when more and more men choosing to identify as women, despite their biological sex at birth, start joining the women's golf team? What does that do for females? Where do they go? I mean, the same people that supported and pushed concepts like Title IX insisting on offering an and rightly so, by the way, offering an equitable playing field so that females who wanted to engage in athletic endeavors in high school and beyond had the ability to do so. And Title IX, I had no problem with Title IX except that it included the football team. And I thought that tilted the teeter-totter in favor of female athletics, meaning if you include the football, a football team, has what? 50 people on it? Let's just say 50. I could be way off, but don't hold me to that. But let's just say it's 50. And I understand in college it's more, and many of them, University of Tennessee was 85 scholarship players, I think that's right. So if you say 50, already the men are starting at a deficit because there is no equitable sport that would have that many people on the female teams. That's what I'm saying. So I would suggest that through Title IX, because it was almost a this for that, you have to have equitable athletic opportunities for women that you do for men. And I was always of the mindset that if you exclude the football team from that equation, I'm just fine with it. Because I don't have any sons or daughters, but I would want my sons and my daughters to have opportunity in sporting activity or sporting endeavors. What do you think the end of all of this is going to be? The same people that pushed for Title IX are now pushing for transgender rights that ultimately push out female athletes. And anytime that someone like Matt Murphy says anything about it, well, I'm just some sort of transgenderist or anti-transgenderist. And if you don't believe that people are already taking advantage of this, you're insane. Obviously they are. Who's the sane one here? Are the sane ones the state of Vermont that passed this ridiculous nonsense legislation demanding that a school like the Mid-Vermont Christian School play against individuals of a different biological sex? Or is it the administration of the Mid-Vermont Christian School that said we withdrew from the tournament because we believe playing against an opponent with a biological male jeopardizes the fairness of the game and the safety of our players? Women have many, many advantages over men. And there are many women that could whip my butt on the golf course. There are plenty of women. Most men and most women, could outshoot me in a horse contest on a basketball court. No one is suggesting that women can't do many of the very same things from a physical or athletic standpoint that men can do. But when they compete against one another, you are denying basic biology when you suggest that men do not have an automatic general advantage over women in a lot of different arenas. I always like to use the example of professional golf. Did you know that there is no rule preventing a woman from being on the PGA Tour? Did you know that? Did you know that, McMorey?
It's like in the NBA as well. There's no rule. Yeah.
I didn't know about that. So in the NBA, any female that wants to attempt to compete and gain a spot on a team has every opportunity to do that.
Come on.
Now, are men allowed in the WNBA?
No.
They are not. Are men allowed on the LPGA?
No.
They're not, and there's a reason for that, guys. And it's not because we're being anti-male. If you eliminated the rule in the LPGA, the Ladies Professional Golf Association, if you eliminated the rule that prevented biological males from competing against the females, you would ultimately have a roster full of men. That is not taking anything away from the ladies on tour. Most of them could kick most of our butts. 99% of our butts on a golf course. But the best of the best in that particular sporting endeavor, the best of the best that are men, are going to be able to compete on a different level, not even a higher level. I'm not even evaluating it along those lines. Just different. Men are biologically designed to be bigger, faster, stronger, by and large. When you muddy these waters like this, what do you expect the outcome's going to be? You know what you see? You see a lot of shocked faces at the swimming pool. A lot of young women, and I've seen this over the last year or two, at swim meets, at wrestling meets, wherever it might be, women, young ladies, disillusioned. Some of their faces look flabbergasted that someone's not stopping this. And it's not that they don't have love and compassion for the males that just beat them at that particular sport. They just don't understand why someone, a grown-up, doesn't step in and do something about it. I applaud the Mid-Vermont Christian School, and you should too. It's time that all of us take a stand against this absolute insanity. It's 2:50 on Super Talk.
A house fire in Franklin and a man who could be armed and dangerous in Clarksville. That and more at 3. Super Talk 99.7 WTN.
Super Talk 99.7 WTN. Just a couple of minutes before we wrap up, hand off to the drive with Brian Wilson. I see where dictionary.com, Mac Morey, you need to look up this story. Have you seen this where dictionary.com is adding 300 plus words to the old Funkin' Wagnalls? Yeah.
Can expand my lexicon.
Can I offer you one of the words that they're using? They're expanding, and then you can tell me what you think this word means. You ready? I got to write it. I've got to write it down.
Oh gosh. Okay.
Talmbout.
Talmbout?
I'll spell it. Talmbout. Talmbout.
That sounds like tell him about it. Tell him about.
It is the vernacular or the common vernacular used for talking about.
Yes.
Amongst many within, and don't blame me here. This is from dictionary.com within the African American community primarily. That's what I'm talking about.
Talking about.
Love it. Also, all right. Also, hold on. The other one was, influencer, like social media influencer. Well, there's now one. This is actually added to the actual dictionary. Petfluencer. Petfluencer. That is a person that uses primarily animals or pets in order to gain a significant social media following. Petfluencer.
Meow.
Dude, what was that?
I don't know.
What was that?
I'm expanding my skills here, man. I'm saying,
Give it to the camera. Give a little something to the camera. That made my Tuesday. Thank you, Maury. All right, Mac Morey, put on your news hat. Do the news.
Yes, sir.
That's what I'm talking about. The drive's coming up. I'm talking about that, too. And we're back at 12 noon tomorrow. Until then, so long.
Three o'clock, I'm Mac Morey with your top stories. Right now, 75 degrees, and it's been a beautiful day in Music City. Expect some showers coming on later this week. Weather and traffic coming up just a few minutes. Right now in Tennessee, fire crews are currently batting a large house fire in Franklin. The Franklin Fire Department says crews are working to put out the house fire on Lancelot Lane in the Founders Point neighborhood. Some video shows flames coming out of the top of the home before being put out by the firefighters. Crews were still working on it as about an hour ago. And staying in Tennessee with a story right now, News 2 reports that Clarksville police are asking people to be aware of a man who they say could be armed and dangerous. 27-year-old Dalton Lawrence is wanted for reportedly assaulting a 33-year-old man a few days ago before leaving the scene. Police say that Lawrence knows the victim. This is not a random act. Lawrence is 6 feet tall and weighs around 195 pounds with brown hair and green eyes. And if you have any information, you're asked to call 911. And over to the Alec Murdaugh trial, where prosecutors are presenting rebuttal witnesses and jurors.
Fireworks on the stand as one of the prosecution's rebuttal witnesses. Ronnie Crosby testified, denying he's angry at Alec Murdaugh for stealing from the law firm where they were partners and friends for 25 years.
Yes, I experienced a lot of anger. But you can't walk around with anger. You have to find a way to deal with it and move forward. And I have done that.
Crosby saying he has no opinion over whether Murdaugh killed his wife Maggie and son Paul.
I thought I knew who Alec was. I did not.
The next development, jurors taking a field trip to the scene of the murders, the Murdaugh family property in rural South Carolina.
And that was Derek Dennis reporting. Over in Nashville with some crime, detectives are working to identify the person who shot a man with an 8-year-old passenger in his car.
It's all on surveillance video. Metro police say on February 20th, around 8 o'clock in the evening, the man with the kid in the car was pumping gas at the Citgo on Dickerson Pike. The suspect, holding 2 handguns, gets out of a black Dodge Charger. Words are exchanged. Then they get back in their vehicles. Well, they start shooting at each other as they speed out of the parking lot. They They do it again minutes later on Centerdale Lane. The man with the 8-year-old in the car was rushed to the hospital with a non-life-threatening bullet wound in the leg. Anyone with information is asked to call Crime Stoppers and become instantly eligible for a cash reward. Ken Weaver, WTN News.
Some possible legislation in the volunteer state. A new bill proposed in Tennessee would require bar owners to have Narcan accessible for customers. This legislation states that if the place sells more than $500,000 of alcohol per year, then that would require them to keep Narcan handy. The owners would also have to pay for it. And another possible bill in Tennessee, this one would allow cash to be accepted at businesses where payment is required on site. This could be pertain to places like a parking lot with QR codes or just when credit and debit card machines fail. And this bill would also give customers the option to pay over check, pay over mail. It will allow basically you to leave the property without paying right there and then. The bill passed the House this week, 75-13. And that is the latest news. Weather's next. I'm Mac Morey, WTN News.